Picture a perfectly manicured lawn in a quiet middle-class London suburb.
Right.
You were just walking down the street in the late 1950s. You hear the distant, comforting hum of a lawnmower. Someone is watering their petunias. A milk float rattles by.
Just totally idyllic.
Exactly. It is the absolute picture of post-war domestic tranquility. But right beneath your feet, like literally buried under the kitchen floor of this completely unremarkable bungalow, is a high-frequency radio transmitter. And it's broadcasting NATO's most closely guarded nuclear secrets directly to Moscow.
It's wild, isn't it? It just forces you to rethink everything about how intelligence networks actually operate. I mean, the most catastrophic breaches of national security rarely happen with, like, a cinematic shootout at a border crossing.
Right.
They happen in the quiet spaces we simply ignore because they just look so ordinary.
Well, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are opening the dossiers on the Portland spy ring, which is universally considered one of the most consequential espionage cases of the entire Cold War.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, so we're looking at 45 Cranley Drive in Ruislip, West London. In the mid-1950s, this was the home of Peter and Helen Kroger. Right. And to anyone walking down Cranley Drive, they were just this polite, unassuming couple from New Zealand. They ran a respectable antiquarian book business called P&H Kroger Rare Books.
Yeah, they specialized in 19th century travel narratives and early scientific texts. They attended local book fairs. They were incredibly friendly with their neighbors. But, reading through the MI5 inventory of what was actually inside that house, it is staggering.
It really is.
They had a massive 75-foot radio aerial entirely concealed within the attic. It was intricately disguised as ordinary household wiring.
Yeah, and they excavated a compartment beneath their kitchen floor tiles just to house a high-frequency transmitter. They completely insulated it with vibration-dampening material so it wouldn't hum when in use.
That is insane.
They even constructed a secret darkroom accessed through a false panel in their bedroom, and it was outfitted with state-of-the-art microphotography equipment.
I mean, it is the equivalent of discovering a modern sleeper cell hiding behind a totally benign front. It's like finding out someone running a quaint little vintage clothing store on Etsy is secretly housing a massive liquid-cooled server farm for international cyber espionage in their basement.
That's actually a perfect comparison.
But my question is, how do you construct a literal spy base in the middle of a polite British suburb without a single neighbor noticing the construction? Like, how does that happen?
Well, the KGB's Directorate S specialized in exactly this kind of deep cover logistics. Their entire operational model relied on a concept called dead double.
Dead doubles.
Yeah. So to place illegal operatives in Western countries, KGB officers would scour foreign graveyards and municipal records. They were looking for citizens who had died in childhood or under obscure circumstances.
Wow.
In this instance, they stole the identities of a real New Zealand couple who had perished in a remote car crash.
Which means, I guess, if local law enforcement or British intelligence ever did a surface-level background check, the municipal paperwork would hold up.
Exactly. The passports bore authentic New Zealand government seals. They were issued based on forged applications mirroring real birth records. And using New Zealand identities in the 1950s was just a calculated masterstroke.
How so?
As Commonwealth citizens, they could travel to the UK and establish residency without raising any red flags. Furthermore, verifying their deep background required international correspondence by sea freight.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so that built-in bureaucratic delay provided an enormous operational buffer.
And their choice of profession acts as the ultimate cover for their day-to-day behavior. Think about what a rare book dealer actually does. They have an irregular, unpredictable income, which perfectly masks random influxes of cash from a handler.
Oh, definitely.
And they have a built-in excuse to travel internationally to book fairs across Europe. Plus, crucially, they're constantly packing and shipping large, heavy parcels overseas.
The bookshop wasn't just a cover story. It was the logistical framework of their espionage. Every suspicious activity was entirely justified by their public profession.
But the Krogers were an illusion. The sources detailed the moment that illusion shattered. After the house was eventually raided, Scotland Yard ran the Krogers' fingerprints. The FBI database came back with a match, revealing they were actually Morris and Lona Cohen.
Right. They were American communists, deeply embedded in Soviet intelligence for decades before they ever set foot in Ruislip. Morris Cohen fought in the Spanish Civil War in the 1930s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that battlefield environment is where Soviet recruiters often identified individuals with absolute ideological commitment and, physical courage.
Lona Cohen's history is even more intense, though. During World War II, she was a vital courier for the Soviet effort to penetrate the Manhattan Project.
The atomic bomb.
Yeah. The files describe her smuggling atomic bomb schematics, specifically the plutonium detonation mechanism stolen by a scientist named Theodore Hall in New Mexico. And she transported them across the United States, hidden in tissue boxes and shopping bags, right past federal authorities.
It's incredible. And the intelligence she transported materially accelerated the Soviet nuclear program. But by 1950, the FBI began closing the net.
Right, the Venona Project.
Exactly. They were actively decrypting Soviet cables, and key atomic spies were being arrested. The Cohens were forced to flee the United States, effectively vanishing behind the Iron Curtain to Moscow and then Poland.
Wait. They were completely blown. The FBI knew who they were and had their fingerprints on file. I'm trying to make sense of the KGB strategy here. Reusing two burned agents in a major Western capital just a few years later seems like an unforgivable security liability. Why not send fresh operatives with clean records?
What's fascinating here is how Moscow Center calculated risk versus capability. Finding an individual willing to be an illegal operative is hard enough.
Sure.
Finding someone with the proven psychological resilience to survive decades of deep cover work, combined with flawless, battle-tested tradecraft, is nearly impossible. The Cohens were simply too valuable an asset to retire.
So the KGB bets that rigorous retraining and an airtight new identity will outweigh the risk of their past catching up to them.
That's right. They underwent years of advanced training in Moscow, mastering counter-surveillance, secure communications, microphotography, all of it, before being deployed to London as the Krogers.
So they build this state-of-the-art communications hub in Ruislip. But a transmitter is useless without intelligence to broadcast. This forces us to look at where the information was actually coming from. The Admiralty Underwater Weapons Establishment, or AUWE, located on the Isle of Portland in Dorset.
In the 1950s, AUWE was the absolute epicenter of British naval research. The scientists there were developing next-generation sonar systems, torpedo guidance technologies, and comprehensive anti-submarine warfare doctrine for NATO.
And the KGB's key to unlocking this fortress of naval secrets was a man named Harry Houghton. Reading his profile in the MI5 files is just wild. He is the ex-Navy clerk with a chronic, very public drinking problem.
Oh, yeah. Very public.
His marriage is falling apart in a spectacularly messy way, and he has significant gambling debts. He was originally recruited in Warsaw by Polish intelligence, who basically saw him as an easy mark before being passed up to the KGB. Houghton is the walking definition of a human resources red flag.
Absolutely.
It feels like leaving the bank vault wide open because you decided to trust the guy visibly holding a crowbar.
It points directly to a fatal systemic flaw in 1950s British security culture. The entire vetting apparatus was crippled by deep-seated classism and post-war bureaucratic fatigue. Security clearances weren't based on continuous behavioral auditing or financial checks. They were based on institutional assumptions.
Because he had a British military background, the assumption was simply that he was, a loyal chap.
The culture dictated that if you wore the uniform and belonged to the right institutions, your loyalty was beyond question. Character references carried far more weight than empirical evidence of vulnerability.
That's wild.
Furthermore, the physical security protocols at AUWE were alarmingly lax. There was an established, accepted practice that permitted senior staff and trusted clerks to take highly classified technical documents home with them for evening study.
That is staggering. You could essentially check out top-secret nuclear submarine files like library books. And Houghton didn't even have to find the files himself. He partnered with Ethel Bunty G., a filing clerk at AUWE, who had comprehensive access to the facility's most sensitive document vaults.
Right. G would locate the critical technical reports, and Houghton would exploit the home study loophole to remove them from the base. Once off-site, Houghton used a subminiature Minox camera to photograph the documents.
Taking thousands of photos of dense technical blueprints is a massive logistical challenge. So now Houghton G have the film in Dorset, and the Cohens have the transmitter in London. Getting the intelligence from point A to point B required a middleman.
And that role was filled by Kunan Malady, a highly trained Soviet illegal operating under the alias Gordon Longsdale. He posed as a successful Canadian businessman selling jukeboxes and bubblegum machines to pubs across London.
Which, again, is an incredibly smart cover.
Yeah.
A jukebox vendor has a legitimate reason to travel constantly, carry large amounts of unrecorded cash, and hold meetings in random, noisy public places.
Exactly. Lonsdale served as the crucial air gap between the source of the leak and the communication hub. On the first Saturday of every month, Houghton and G would travel by train from Dorset to London.
Just a normal weekend trip?
Yep. They would meet Lonsdale in crowded, chaotic environments like Waterloo Station or outside the Old Vic Theatre. They utilized brush passes. That's a rapid, almost imperceptible exchange of shopping bags as they walked past each other.
Classic spycraft.
Right. Houghton delivered the exposed Minox film, and Lonsdale delivered thousands of pounds in untraceable cash.
And Lonsdale then takes that film directly to the Cohens at the Ruslip bungalow. Here's where it gets really interesting, but also a bit confusing. The declassified files describe the Cohens taking this film and turning it into microdots.
Yes.
We are talking about a photographic process that shrinks an entire page of complex technical blueprints down to the size of a printed period, like a literal speck of dust. They would then meticulously glue these microdots into the bindings of the antiquarian books they shipped overseas. But wait, if they went through all the trouble of excavating their kitchen floor to hide a massive, high-tech radio transmitter, why use microdots at all? Why not just radio the intelligence straight to Moscow?
That comes down to the physics of 1950s communications and the realities of counter-surveillance. The radio transmitter was used exclusively for what intelligence agencies call burst transmissions.
Meaning the broadcasts are incredibly short.
Seconds long. The Cohens utilized one-time cipher pads. A one-time pad is a cryptographic key that is completely random, the exact same length as the message itself, and crucially destroyed immediately after a single use.
Oh, okay.
Because there is no repeating mathematical pattern, it is theoretically impossible to crack. Lona Cohen would encode an operational message, record it onto magnetic tape, speed the tape up dramatically, and broadcast it in a 2-second burst.
So they keep the broadcast under 2 seconds because British Signals Intelligence, GCHQ, has direction-finding vans patrolling London. If you broadcast for 5 minutes, they triangulate your house. If you broadcast for 2 seconds, they hear a blip and get nothing.
That constraint makes the radio perfect for operational logistics, confirming a drop, requesting funds, receiving orders. But you cannot push thousands of pages of incredibly dense visual data, like the acoustic cross-section of a submarine, through a high-frequency radio in 2 seconds.
Right, that makes total sense.
The microdots were the freight train required for the bulk transfer of the actual stolen cargo.
So the radio is just for texting the boss, and the books carry the real weight. And what they were carrying was devastating. AUWE was finalizing the development of the Type 2001 sonar. That was the advanced detection system being built for the HMS Dreadnought, the UK's very first nuclear-powered submarine.
The documents Houghton and G smuggled out did not merely inform Moscow that a new sonar existed. They contained the exact acoustic frequencies NATO utilized to track Soviet vessels.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. They included highly classified data on propeller cavitation. That's the distinct noise signature created by bubbles forming and collapsing as a propeller spins underwater.
So what does this all mean? Imagine you're an engineer building a defense system. It feels like you just handed the opposing team the exact radar frequencies your new anti-aircraft system uses so they can go back to their labs and build a stealth bomber specifically tuned to be invisible to your equipment.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the strategic fallout was immediate and measurable. Armed with the precise acoustic blueprints of NATO's detection capabilities, Soviet naval architects initiated rapid modifications.
They just changed their own subs?
Yep. They applied experimental acoustic hull coatings and redesigned the propellers on their Project 611 Zulu class and Project 613 Wisty class submarines.
And Western intelligence originally estimated they had a 7 to 10 year technological lead over the Soviet submarine fleet.
Once the Portland spy ring's intelligence was fully integrated by Moscow, analysts revised that estimate. The technological gap had violently narrowed to just 3 to 4 years.
That is a massive leap.
The Soviet Navy leaped forward half a decade in a matter of months. This case proved definitively that scientific espionage can shift the global balance of power far more rapidly than stealing diplomatic cables.
But a pipeline moving that much physical film and that much cash is eventually going to drop a breadcrumb. Let's look at how this highly disciplined network finally unraveled.
The initial fracture came from thousands of miles away. A Polish intelligence officer named Mikhail Goleniewski, codenamed Sniper, defected and began supplying the CIA with information. He couldn't provide exact names, but he offered a specific profile. A British Royal Navy employee with prior service in Warsaw who was actively providing intelligence to the Soviets. And he thought the surname sounded like Horton.
Horton is close enough to Houghton to trigger alarms at MI5. They pull his file and immediately notice a glaring discrepancy. Houghton is buying expensive cars and spending lavishly, which completely contradicts his modest civil service salary.
MI5 deployed watcher units to monitor his movements. This is incredibly complex surveillance work. A watcher unit doesn't just put one car behind a suspect.
Right.
They use highly coordinated teams, constantly rotating agents on foot, on public transit, and in vehicles, creating a box around the target so the suspect never sees the same face twice.
And that watcher unit follows Houghton and G on their Saturday trip to London. They observe the brush pass at Waterloo Station. Now, MI5 has Lonsdale. They apply the same suffocating surveillance to Lonsdale, tracking his expensive car out to the quiet bungalow on Cranley Drive.
Simultaneously, GCHQ's direction-finding bands finally caught a break. They detected one of the high-speed burst transmissions and successfully triangulated the signal to the immediate vicinity of the Krogers' home.
This triggers the MI5 black bag operations, which is one of the most intense phases of the investigation. You have MI5 agents waiting for the Cohens to leave the house. They silently pick the locks, slip inside, and have to map the entire operational layout without displacing a single speck of dust.
It's incredible precision.
They photograph the hidden transmitter beneath the floor, document the cipher pads, locate the microdot equipment in the darkroom, and just vanish.
It was essential to secure the evidentiary chain before making a single arrest, ensuring no operative could slip the net and no intelligence could be destroyed. On January 7, 1961, MI5 executed a coordinated simultaneous strike.
The hammer falls.
Yes. They intercepted Houghton G and Lonsdale in London at the exact moment of a handoff. G's shopping bag contained 4 undeveloped rolls of Minix film packed with classified files on the Dreadnought submarine.
And then later that evening, special branch officers raided the bungalow in Ruislip. The arrest reports detail an incredibly tense moment where Helen Cohen, Lona, calmly asks the arresting officers if she can go stoke the boiler before she is taken to the station.
So bold.
Yeah. An officer stops her and insists on searching her handbag first.
Mm-hmm.
Inside the bag were fresh microdots. She was attempting a final act of tradecraft, walking straight to the fire to incinerate the evidence.
The judicial response was swift and uncompromising. At the Old Bailey, Lonsdale received 25 years. The Cohens were sentenced to 20 years. Wadden and G each received 15 years.
Wow.
Beyond the prison sentences, the subsequent Romer Committee inquiry aggressively dismantled the lax security culture at naval bases. The era of taking nuclear secrets home for evening study was permanently ended.
It is a massive geopolitical victory for Western counterintelligence. But, when you engage with the cultural reflections of this case, particularly Hugh Whitemore's playback of lies, you are forced to confront the immense collateral damage inflicted on ordinary people. Think about the Searches, the Krogers' immediate neighbors on Cranley Drive.
The Search family represents the profound human cost of espionage. Wilfred and Ruth Search considered Peter and Helen Kroger to be their closest friends. When MI5 zeroed in on the bungalow, they requisitioned the Search's home as a surveillance post.
Oh, man.
Ruth Search was placed in an agonizing position. She was instructed by MI5 to maintain her daily routine, having tea with her dear friend Helen, knowing full well she was sitting across from a Soviet intelligence officer while British agents listened upstairs.
The psychological weight of that deception must have been crushing.
It broke her. The betrayal by her closest friends, compounded by the stress of the investigation, devastated Ruth Search. She suffered a fatal heart attack shortly after the Cohens were ultimately released from British prison in a diplomatic spy swap.
And that is the jarring reality of the Cold War. The neighbors are left devastated. Houghton and G sit in a British prison. Meanwhile, Lonsdale and the Cohens are swacked back behind the Iron Curtain. In Moscow, the Cohens weren't treated as criminals. They were awarded the title of Heroes of the Russian Federation. They were celebrated on commemorative postage stamps.
This raises an important question about perspective. To Western intelligence, they were a devastating threat that severely compromised global security. To Moscow, they were highly decorated veterans who executed a nearly flawless, decade-long mission deep inside hostile territory.
It is a phenomenal saga. From Lona Cohen smuggling plutonium schematics in tissue boxes to Harry Houghton walking out of a Dorset naval base with submarine blueprints in his pocket. All of it funneling through an antiquarian bookshop in an idyllic London suburb. For years, they weaponized the mundane, operating flawlessly in the shadows to physically shift the balance of naval power in the Atlantic.
It proves that the greatest vulnerabilities in any security apparatus are rarely technological. They are almost always human.
And it leaves me thinking about a statement Lona Cohen made in her later years attempting to justify her life's work. She famously said, "No American soldier died because of what I have done." But when your actions hand an adversary the exact technology required to silence an entire fleet of nuclear submarines, permanently accelerating an arms race, well, can we ever truly measure the casualty count of a stolen secret? Or the true cost just buried, hidden away beneath the floorboards, waiting to be uncovered?